It's been another strange, weird, scary, uncertain year. And as 2021 is drawing to a close, we wanted to spend today's show reflecting on some of the things we've learned about leading and managing in uncertain times.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to Coffee Time with Masterminds.
My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I am Cynthia Rojas, founder and principal of To Your Growth.
Welcome to Coffee Time with Masterminds. I'm Rebecca Tuttle, founder and principal of Grant Right Now and Grant Writing for Good.
My name is Peta Blakely, and I'm the founder and principal of Blakely Consulting. I'm joined by my friend and colleague, Cynthia Rojas. Good morning, Cynthia.
How are you, Peta?
Hanging in there. Good to see you. So folks probably know that we post announcements on social media about what we're going to be talking about on our show every week. And this week I wrote, we've lived through another year. And someone helpfully pointed out that a lot of us have not. In fact, I want to thank Jean for that correction. 390,000 people died of COVID in the United States this year, more than died in 2020 from the pandemic. So I think that really matters. And it's frequently left out of the conversation. We're still living through scary, traumatic global pandemic. So what does this mean for mission-based organizations? What are some of the things that we've seen this year, Cynthia?
Oh, my. So in terms of organizations?
Yes.
Really trying to redefine the new way of working.
Yeah.
That has been such a struggle for our nonprofit leaders. You know, we thought in September we were all going to go back to the office and we were going to be able to put this behind us. And now we're rethinking about writing actual policies about who comes into the office, who stays at home, what can be done remotely, what does hybrid look like, and all of those things. So that's been a big issue that ran into 2021, and it's still being talked about by nonprofit leaders.
And I think it's going to be talked about for a long time going forward, right? I mean, it's connected to a lot of the other things that we've seen this year, right? So organizations aren't just doing their work differently. Sometimes they're doing completely different work, right?
Yes.
And we've seen a lot of, I think the organizations that we have seen be the most successful are the ones that have been really adaptive in terms of meeting a different set of needs.
Yes. And the challenge, and so we've seen that, and I think last week we talked about some examples. The challenge has been the Great Resignation, right?
Yeah.
So I've been in conversation this week at least 3 times about training staff. This rotation is leading to a lot of new staff needing to be hired and then needing to be trained. And the training is a huge investment from an organization. Huge. And if the person doesn't stay, you're out your investment.
And we've seen, I mean, let's be clear about why people are leaving their jobs, because I think there are a few things going on. So some of those people are just not alive and available to work, right? A lot of other people are either re-examining their priorities in the context of this major upheaval, or responding to changes in their responsibilities and their situations because of this upheaval, right? And it's happening at every level of work. So there are frontline and direct care workers who are leaving their positions, or maybe they haven't left, but there is more need. And so there's a need for more people to do that work. And then there's also senior leadership that's responding to exactly the same thing. So executive directors are also re-examining their life's priorities or having childcare issues or, whatever other constraints, and turnover is happening in those organizations. And it compounds the stress and the challenges for the staff that are still there, right? And in terms of them onboarding new staff, in terms of them working short-staffed and under tremendous strain, right? So we cannot overstate how important that is for organizations, and it's not going away, right? This is not.
Yeah. And I think there's this, as I watch the news, I think there's this facade that's happening in that we keep talking about how the economy is doing well, it's doing better, and that's good, and it is for many of us. But for others, it's not. And let's not let the economy or what's happening there eclipse the fact that we're still dealing with a lot of mental health issues. There are still people who are um, dealing with a mental health issue that happens last year and spilled into 2021. And then there are those that the continuation of this different way of being is adding to the stress that they're living through and really affecting their mental health. And so when I watch the news and I hear things like that, and I do know that some people have, moved on and built businesses. I met someone last night at a market and we were asking her about her business, and she started in the middle of the pandemic. She had lost her job and now she does markets and she sells wonderful, wonderful baskets. And but that was a major, shift. And so while that's a positive for her, she also had to grieve losing her job and needing to change her whole life.
And let's also point out that like change is stressful even when it's a good thing.
Oh,
So,
God.
right. So even if people are excited about starting their new business or excited about moving to a different city, right, or whatever they're doing, that's still stressful, right? Things can be positive, it's still stressful. Going back to the office is stressful, or realizing that you're never going back to the office is stressful, right? All of these things.
You know what I pay attention to, and it's so interesting that more and more of us are walking around without masks. We've been vaccinated, we're choosing, and yet workers still have to wear their masks.
Yeah.
And when it was the time when we were living through a time where everybody was wearing a mask, it probably felt uncomfortable for most of us, but okay.
Mhm.
And now I look at workers who wear it all day and my heart goes out to them. And it's like, wow, that's hard because more and more people are doing without a mask. And so, again, we have to think about there's a whole part of the population who's still experiencing this in a very different way.
Yes. There's so much to unpack there.
Did that surprise you, or was that?
And you're bringing up, one of the ways that I think this ongoing pandemic has highlighted inequalities, right? And made us more aware of some of these things, right?
Yeah.
And I think that's, I think we are headed into one of the great worker rights eras in U.S. history.
Mhm.
And it's going to be fantastic when we get to the end. It's going to be really uncomfortable in the short term. And things like seeing who has to wear a mask and who doesn't have to wear a mask, who is being compensated appropriately for the job that they're really doing, who feels like they were suddenly treated like heroes last year, but then laid off this year. All of that is like coming into this conversation, and we can't ignore it the way we did before, right? I think there were a lot of higher paid workers who had absolutely no understanding of what went on in lower paid jobs. And I think we're getting our eyes opened about that. And it's a good and positive thing in the long run.
Another thing I find very stressful, this is not related to nonprofits, but this is part of our everyday life, is if you've gone to a restaurant,
Mhm.
you probably have noticed a little bit of chaos going on the front end. And
Yep.
that's due to there's been a major shift in how people eat out. And there's a lot of delivery happening and so a lot of takeout in restaurants that didn't even specialize in that.
Yeah.
So this is like a great example of the plus here is that many restaurants have been able to survive the pandemic because they pivoted to deliveries. However, I still see a year later the struggle to streamline that process in a way that still allows them to take care of their patrons and take care of their delivery
Yeah.
orders. And so I walk into restaurants now and I feel like people are just like,
And they're short-staffed, right?
Yeah.
And they're always short-staffed for all these reasons that we've talked about. You know, when Alicia Modestino came on the show and she talked to us about restaurants in particular, and some of the reasons that they're not able to hire as many staff as they should. And one is just that their business model doesn't work for the new reality, right? They are still trying to use their old business model in new times, and it's just not working. And so many organizations are going to have that conversation, right?
Yes. Yes.
You know, we've talked about when we talked about pay equity in the childcare industry as well. Like same thing. We got to fundamentally rethink how these industries work, right?
Yeah. And so that's an experience that is like I walk into a restaurant and there are people like running around me because a lot of this is happening on the front end. And it's like, oh my, what is it gonna take or how long is it gonna be until we can go to a restaurant and enjoy our time and this is all streamlined. So yeah, let's not be fooled at how people are being impacted by this. We did a lot of episodes. You and I were going through this year's episodes in preparation for the show, and we did a lot of episodes on motivation.
Yeah.
Right. And what drives motivation? And we know that one driver of motivation is feeling competent. Right. When you feel you can do something well, you tend to be motivated to do it. And wow, has this been a year of feeling incompetent?
Yeah, right. For everybody.
Yeah. It's really hard. It's really hard to, feel like you can do it. And we're all learning it together. We are totally learning it together.
And I think, one of the mistakes we made was we thought when 2020 ended that all the bad stuff that started in 2020 was going to end with it, right? There was a certain amount of magical thinking about that. And it sure didn't. Now we've got to start taking some of these changes and realizing this is permanent. This is our new normal, right? So how can we lead and manage given this new set of realities?
Yeah. And so again, not so much about nonprofits, but really about the everyday, right? I'll be interested to hear from you, Peter. Like, how have you incorporated this in your everyday? I know for me, I purchased lanyards. This might sound like a minor thing, but I have lanyards for my masks. I have them everywhere. I bought them for members of my family because when you go out, it's good to put it on, but then when you're outdoors, I choose to take it off when I'm walking like in the parking lot just so that I can breathe. And so I have disposable masks everywhere. The same way people have hand sanitizer, the way I would have, I don't know what I used to have.
Hairbands. like hairbands or handkerchiefs. Like there's just one in every handbag.
Right. And so I've just learned that this is just a new way of being. My mom commented about, she's like, wow, you have a lot of disposable masks. You change them all the time. I said, well, I change them every day. I never use the same one, which is why I use disposable. Please don't send me any hate mail about how I'm destroying the earth. But I choose consciously to use disposable. But also sometimes throughout the day, depending on where I just came out of, I might just switch the mask right there. So my mom thinks it's hilarious that I have tons and tons of masks inside my car. But for me, that's just a new way of being. What have
That's
you done? What's different for you?
yeah, we do have masks everywhere. There's one in every handbag. There's several in the car. And I think that's permanent.
Yeah.
I can't really picture myself, getting on an airplane or on public transportation without a mask or sitting in a doctor's office without a mask.
I know.
Can't really picture that, right? Ever happening.
Yes.
So I think there are a lot of things about how I live and about how I run my business that are
Mhm.
probably permanent. One is the bar for me now for a face-to-face meeting is really high.
Yeah.
Um, I used to just kind of drop in on anything, right? Um, and I found that because all my meetings are on Zoom now, uh, I meet more frequently with clients and
Mhm.
colleagues, because it's easier and that's actually better for my
Yeah.
business, right? It keeps things
Yes.
moving forward better. Um, but then, when I got an announcement about an in-person event this week, I was like, it's really hard to imagine, like getting in the car after 5 to go to an unfamiliar places, sit in a
Yeah.
room with other people, right? Like, why? And I think that's going to be permanent. I think more importantly, um, we we are now used to being in everybody's house all the time, right?
Yes.
Because we're talking to everybody on Zoom, you're always seeing something of the inside of people's houses, right? Your
Mhm.
colleagues, your bosses, everybody has met each other's spouses, met each other's kids and
Right.
pets. And we're no longer pretending that our work selves are different or separate from our personal selves. And that has really important management implications, right, for how we work together. So, Cynthia, one of the things that you brought up really early on was we don't have hallways anymore. We don't have corridors and we don't have water coolers. So you have to build in time in a Zoom call for chatting, right? For like unstructured conversation, because that's how you maintain relationships, right? Um, and I think that kind of practice is going to put organizations in good stead, that they're thinking about that they're actually consciously nurturing those relationships rather than
Mhm.
passively letting them happen. Um, and I think we're all we're all now thinking about structural care. Now that's a topic that we brought up more than a year ago when we
Yeah.
started distinguishing between self-care and structural care. And even back then, we talked about how one individual who was already experiencing stress or disadvantage can't just pull themselves out of it by taking a warm bath or whatever
Right.
ridiculousness, right? Now I think organizations have got to really, really think about this. Like, what does it mean to be an organization where people can work here and be okay, right? Like, and not be overly stressed and not be re-traumatized and not be getting worked to death and manage their child care and family care responsibilities. We've got a much better understanding of what goes on in people's houses, that people have family members that they're taking care of. The olden days workplace, which was designed for a 1950s era heterosexual married white man, right? Hasn't worked for anybody for a long time.
Right.
And now we're going to have some like frank and transparent conversations about that. So,
Yeah, you mentioned something, and I read recently about this idea, and I do want to address the comments. So, Rebecca, leave it up
mhm,
because I really do
yeah.
want to talk about that. But this idea of where the 40-hour work week came from, and at the time that it began to become embedded in our culture, there were usually two parent households and one parent stayed home to support.
Or at least that was the perception and the ideal.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
And that we are so far gone from that.
Right.
And to be out of home for 40 hours a week is just the craziest thing. This
Right.
crazy idea. And it
Yeah.
does not
You
work.
can't actually, right. I mean, 40 hours plus commute and whatever else you do.
I mean, when you think about there are 168 hours in a week, and let's say we sleep, let's say we do the average sleep, 8 times 7 is 42, I think. And then 40 hours, we are now gone half the time either sleeping or working.
Right.
And we haven't taken into account what you said, transportation and things like
Yeah.
that.
Right.
Let's talk about mental wellness, because Rebecca, who remains our producer, thank you so much, brought this up before, and she says, as we accept the new normal, it's really important to support those who struggle with adapting. Do you have any recommendations for lending support to others in distress? Well, Peter named one of them, and that's checking in and having conversation. I will say this, something that really helped me was there was a time where Peter and I would get together on Zoom and we would work together, but we would just be together in Zoom, but working in our respective places. And so we would mute, but if we had a question, I could unmute myself and ask her the question. And I felt like I was with her. I mean, it was when we did it, and we haven't done it just because we're busy and we recently moved, but we'll probably go back to it. But when we did it, it's like I felt, oh my God, like this is what it was like the year before the pandemic, where I could sit with someone in the same room and just chat. And so organizations can do that, right? As leaders, we can set quote unquote office hours, have your staff drop in, and let's mute everybody and work, but keep the screen up so you can see everybody. And trust me, it will feel as close to what it was as can possibly be. It will. And that was a huge help. That was because the isolation is hard for me. And so having you there, is always great. So I did it with someone else also, and she loved the idea. And so we used to do it all the time as well.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think, I think those elements of isolation and things like that, some organizations have said it has not been a problem. They've given up their offices. They realized it was a needless expense. Everybody works from home and it works better for everybody.
Yeah.
Other organizations have had a really hard time maintaining their workplace culture, their connections, right, and their kind of sense of shared spirit, given all this. And waiting until we go back to the office is not a viable plan.
Right.
Like, it's not. It's probably not going to happen. Right. It's not going to happen the way it was before.
No. And I think that's a powerful statement, because I was one of those people that was counting down.
Yep.
I was waiting until it ended. And
Yeah.
so when it didn't, and things started coming back up, and then Delta came, that was when I realized, okay, I'm going to stop hoping that this ends and just learn to live with it. So I bought more masks. I actually threw away my masks at one point.
Yeah. I mean,
I was really hopeful.
Am I going to need these? And then no, this fall I started buying them again.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of brought on another round of depression. Like this summer, we thought we saw the end of it, and then we didn't, and that was like a big disappointment for people. So, that's had some implications too.
Yeah.
So,
I'm sorry.
I was going to turn our conversation to equity and how one of the equity's come up in so many of these conversations, but one of the things we discovered when we stopped making people go to work was that there was really no reason for people to go to work, and that having people physically go to the office had created some unnecessary barriers for parents, for people with young kids, for people with elder care responsibilities, for people with disabilities, right? There are all these people who had been excluded, and we did not need to be excluding them. So I think that is bringing up a really great conversation. Um, we are also still, and I think we will be for a long time, reckoning with the movement that started in the summer of 2020 and a movement towards racial justice. And in the past, it's been my observation that when there's a crisis, that becomes an excuse to back off diversity and equity initiatives to focus on the urgent problem. I think this year, as a country, we finally got it, that is the urgent problem. And instead of tabling it for later, we're leaning into it and making a commitment to come back better. Um, and this is great, and we saw that in one of the surveys that Cynthia talked about, that FEO partners had done, that people were really committed to it. And I'm seeing it on the ground, that the projects that are kicking off right now are really sincere about diversity, equity, inclusion, or justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion, depending on how you say it, in a way that I think is really important, and is also going to have implications for restructuring, permanently restructuring our organizations, thinking about how we staff, given all of this turnover, given these leadership changes. Now is the time to build in planning that advances equity, right? Given that we're creating a new rule book and a new set of policies and a new operating manual, how are we going to do that in a way that centers equity, that doesn't treat it as an add-on? So I think that's the exciting potential of this year.
Yeah. And I think, and we're close to the end. If there's anything that I want to leave with is, let's remember that leading through all of this are individuals who are
Right.
also going through their own issues, and that we have asked over and over again to take care of their staff. But I think that as we see that this is a new normal, we really have to shift that thinking and also take care of our leaders who are dealing with not just a pandemic and the mental health of many, many employees. I was talking to a leader the other day, 400 employees, right? There's all sorts of issues. A lot of them are normal issues, and her stress level is sky high. And so let's remember that these are individuals as well, and let's take care of our leaders, especially the ones who haven't left and are still there through all of this. These are really complex times. And so
Yeah,
if there's anything I want to end with is that idea.
yeah. They need structural care too.
They do. They
Yeah,
do. Yeah. And so we should have a conversation with a couple of board members about how they take care of their leaders.
yeah.
Yeah, because that's an opportunity there as well. It looks also, we have an announcement that Rebecca will be joining us in January. So if you remember, Rebecca was recovering but remains behind the scenes and helping us advance the show. But also, she is our producer and has been valuable so that Peter and I can be focused on the conversation. So
That's
thank you,
wonderful.
Rebecca. Looking forward to seeing you. Any parting words, Peter?
Oh, I think this was the year that reality set in.
Yeah.
Um, and we even saw it through this show um, in the summer of this year. We all thought that we were entering the post-COVID future, right? Remember that in the first year of our show, we were planning for the
Yeah.
post-COVID future. And this summer, we thought we were getting there, and like we were
Yeah.
now building the post-COVID future. There's no such thing as the post-COVID future.
Right.
So how do we build the best, strongest, fairest, most equitable, most resilient, and most adaptive versions of our organizations and ourselves right now,
Yeah.
given this new normal.
Right now, because that's all we have is right now.
Yeah.
I love that. I love that.
Have a great weekend, everybody.
Yeah. And we'll see you next week for some more self-reflection. All right. Take care. Bye.